As Rachel said, I'm Matt Pahnke, Principal Scientist at the Gatorade Sports Science Institute. And I'm going to be speaking briefly about a new line of products from Gatorade, ESSNTL, that's developed specifically for the locker room with input from athletes. So the reason that we created ESSNTL was essentially there were requests from the locker rooms. As many of you know, we have team sport managers, and there's a lot of interaction that you have with them. Maybe your G-Force is visiting. You have discussion with your athletes, pass on some of the comments to the Gatorade representative. And so this line was created specifically to address some of those needs. So one of the asks has been a cleaner line of products, less artificial, more natural products. Another is being able to use products in a customizable way, so delivering exactly what you want to give to the athlete. And you'll see in the line, and the products I'll be talking about today are specifically in a powder form so that you can do that easily. And then also expanding when you're providing sports nutrition to the athlete. You know, we've always talked about in the past having certain things before, during, and after exercise, but you'll see that Gatorade's expanding a little bit to some other occasions, and I'll speak briefly about one product that would fit that need. So the products I'll be speaking about are specifically around a product during exercise, a couple for after exercise, and then one specifically designed for sleep. When we think of during exercise, we think of hydration quite frequently, but then there's also the carbohydrate and fueling needs that we discuss. So when we're talking about hydration, as many of you know, dehydration is a bad thing for athletes. A little bit's okay, but once you go beyond 2% in hot conditions, 3 to 5% in cool conditions, and we start seeing more and more negative effects on the athlete and their performance. Regarding carbohydrate needs, if the athletes are exercising for more than an hour, we know that we should give them about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. And in some cases, if they're exercising for longer, even more carbohydrate. And that could also be the case if maybe they're doing 2-a-days and they haven't replenished their glycogen stores. So you need to give them a little bit more carbohydrate because their glycogen is depleted. So you may want to give them a little bit more carbohydrate. But the one product in the ESSNTL line, which you may be familiar with in the bottle, is G-Organic. So now it's going to be available in a powder format. And the profile is very similar to G-Organic. Now when it comes out in the locker room, similar to when G-Organic came out, the organic certification will be coming as it moves from the locker room down the road and is launched more broadly. But you'll see that it's still a 6% carbohydrate solution. You know, the organic ingredients included in the formulation, once again meeting the needs. And when it's launched, you'll see that similar to some of the flavors with G-Organic in the bottle, you have strawberry and mango. With that, I'll move on to post-exercise. So many people think of protein when they think of post-exercise. Yes, that's extremely important, and the products are focused on that, but then you also have to remember, do the athletes need to rehydrate? Do they need to replenish their glycogen, start getting that going, especially if they're going to be doing another training session that day? So protein is important for a variety of reasons. I'm obviously not going to go through all those, but that's why it's so important, because it's used in so many different bodily functions that we want to make sure that we're providing protein to the athletes. And when you're thinking about protein, you know, the type of protein is important, when you're giving it to them is important, and how much they're getting is important. So we know about 20 grams is the right amount of protein for most athletes. However, you know, more and more discussion has been had around athlete size, and is 20 grams really right in all cases? You know, if you have someone that's a female gymnast and you have a lineman in American football, obviously could be very different sizes and probably different protein needs. So then you can change it and provide the recommendation 0.25 to 0.3 grams per kilogram of body weight. Now, how frequently should they be having protein? There have been studies done looking at this, and specifically in one study, athletes were exercising, resistance exercising, provided 80 grams of protein, but at different amounts at different times. So you see that they were given either from 10 grams at a time up to 40 at different intervals, and they measured muscle protein synthesis, protein breakdown, protein balance to see which pattern of delivery of protein provided the best benefit to the athlete. And they saw about that 20 grams every 3 hours, so that's where the recommendation of every 3 to 4 hours of protein intake is given to athletes to help meet the needs for the muscle protein synthesis and help prevent some of the breakdown or limit the breakdown. Protein type, obviously important as well. Many of you know, and quite popular, whey protein. It's a very quickly digested, high quality protein, high in leucine, which is why it's used very widely. Milk proteins in general are very high quality, and for the vegetarian athletes, soy protein, another high quality protein as well, and another option if they are avoiding dairy products. So you're likely familiar with all these products. There's one newer one from this year, the almond butter bar, which I believe is being sampled on the side. But for most of these, you're probably familiar, available in the store today. But the ESSNTL products, the 3 powders, protein powders that I'll provide a little more detail on, are likely new to you. A few of them are in the locker rooms now, and with the other to come. So you may be familiar with the whey protein isolate. And the whey protein isolate, to meet the clean request by the athletes, it doesn't have artificial flavors, sweeteners, or added sugars, so it's really just the high quality whey protein, 20 grams in a scoop of it with very minimal carbohydrate and fat. And you'll see very few ingredients as well. So with the flavors, most athletes are familiar with the chocolate and vanilla we've offered before, but to meet the customizable needs, there's also the plain flavor, so that if you're making a shake, you can put it in with whatever fruit base you're doing. If the athlete doesn't want chocolate or vanilla flavor in it, it just allows to be able to mix and match and do more things with the protein. The protein plus carbohydrate still has high quality dairy protein in it, but it adds carbohydrate on top of that to help meet that need. As I mentioned in the cases, if athletes are doing 2-a-days and need to get on the glycogen replenishment process right away, this product with the 2 scoops providing 20 grams of protein, but then also 43 grams of carbohydrate. So getting that going, and it also doesn't have artificial flavors in the product as well. Let me click that on. And the last section with overnight recovery, there's been more and more research over the last 5 years on what athletes could be doing for recovery. When we think of how athletes are eating throughout the day, when you eat, you see that spike in muscle protein synthesis. After a while, it starts going negative, down the protein breakdown, and every time you're eating, it goes through that process. But when you're sleeping, it's kind of like fasting overnight, and that's where researchers have looked at, what if we provide protein prior to sleep? What effect will that have on muscle protein synthesis, protein balance? And there have been a variety of research studies over the last few years, as I mentioned. If anyone's interested in these, there's actually online at gssiweb.org, there's a Sports Science Exchange article on sleep and protein. You can get those references there. But basically, it's been looked at in a variety of cases from 27 grams at a time up to 40 grams of protein. And in some studies, it's done in a training study, so over several weeks, athletes were exercising, having their regular recovery protein, then having some casein protein prior to sleep. Some cases, some of the studies are looking at just what happens overnight in one situation, one dose of casein protein, just that single time. And we see that muscle protein synthesis and breakdown, all the positive things that you'd associate with having a high quality protein, that's happening. And we don't entirely know how much exactly you need, but we know that as you go from 30 grams up to 40 grams is a little bit better and you get more benefits. Greater benefit from having that little bit higher amount of casein protein, likely because that period the athlete's sleeping, if it's 7-8 hours, hopefully, many of your athletes probably don't do that, but because of that long time, that higher level of protein is more beneficial. So the product that will be released later this year is casein protein powder, and it similar clean label, not having added sugars, artificial flavors, sweeteners, and when you give it in the 2 scoops, it gives the 40 grams of protein for the athlete, of casein protein. So just to summarize, when athletes should be having protein, you know, that 20 grams every 3-4 hours. For sleep, 30 to 40 grams. We see greater benefits with 40, but some benefits with 30 as well. And then as far as the overall G-Essential line, you know, I mentioned in the beginning that's all about listening to the athletes. So the process right now is a few of these products have already been released, more coming this year, and the plan is to keep releasing products in the locker room, getting feedback, changing the products, and then eventually likely many of them will be released on e-commerce after they've been tested and proven in the locker room, and then available more broadly as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll be standing up on the side. If you don't want to ask in front of everyone, thanks for listening over the lunch hour. I know some of you maybe came from lunch or are ready to go to lunch, so I appreciate you being here. But happy to take any questions. Thanks.
So the protein at night, is it also per kilogram, or is it?
It's just right, because only a few studies have been done and they haven't looked at a wide variety of ranges. They've looked at the case with older people, a little bit lighter weight. They've also looked at young athletic people, and it's really still the 40 grams is likely the ideal. Any other questions? Well, thank you. I'll be on the side if anyone wants to come up and ask. Thanks.